Hey guys, welcome back. Now, with Bitcoin breaking below this key level of $40,000, the big question is, how far down is this thing going to go? So far, it's been a 20% drop for Bitcoin, and many of the top altcoins have dropped 30 to 50%. So is this just a healthy correction, or is a bigger crash coming our way? And so in this video, we'll be digging through some charts to find answers to those questions. And we'll see, is there anything major to be worried about, or is this just business as usual? And so we'll be looking at the previous cycles and how this latest drop compares. We'll take a look at the previous halving year and see, has this happened before? And then we'll finish cross-referencing with seasonality to see if things are still on track, or is there something bigger coming our way? Okay, so first up, a great place to get market intelligence and perspective on what is going on is to see what Bitcoin has done in the previous cycles. And so the question is there anything major to be worried about? So the first starting point is to compare to previous cycles. And this is Bitcoin's history in one chart. In blue, we have cycle 1, orange, we have cycle 2, and green, cycle 3. And then this red one is the one that we're on right now. And this particular chart revolves around the halving, which goes through the middle. And this is days from the halving. Currently around this 100 days out. So the first thing to point out from this chart that we need to take note of, it's very clear that we are getting diminishing returns with each cycle. I believe the first one went to a 300x gain, the next one over a 100x gain, then a 20x gain. And I've mentioned a couple of times, I think this one, playing it safe, if we would expect something around a 10x from bottom to top. Now, it's a little bit difficult to see what's going on here because it's all mishmashed. So let's just quickly take a look cycle by cycle. And this is cycle 1, and it's actually my least favorite to compare against because Bitcoin had not recently launched. It was such a small amount of people, such a tiny amount of money. So I don't really think comparing to this cycle is that useful anymore. But the one thing to note is that it's pretty much exactly where it was. So if anything, we are ahead of where we should be, as this one, as mentioned, went on to do a 300x. So if anything, this should be below this cycle. So the fact that we've dropped down a bit based on this one says there's nothing out of the ordinary going on. Now, cycle 2 is a bit better, but still this went on to do 100x, and where are we? We are pretty much exactly where we were in this cycle. So again, if anything, it should correct a little bit lower, and that would still be normal behavior. The fact that it's on track with this cycle suggests that it's moved up a bit too quickly. And I think what's happened is from this point, the unique thing about this cycle was these Bitcoin ETFs that went live. So the build-up was a couple of months before, and the crypto market and Bitcoin had a massive move in anticipation to the Bitcoin ETFs. That is the uniqueness of this particular cycle. So the fact that it's coming down a bit, again, nothing out of the ordinary. And in fact, we see it with the most recent cycle. We now really get to see the move that has happened over the past couple of months. It was a massive move, all the way down from about 25,000 to almost 50. So for Bitcoin, that is one hell of a move. Now, the reason I don't like looking at crypto on daily charts is because these kind of moves freak people out. But when you look at it in the context of the crypto market, it's really nothing out of place. And in fact, this drop is relatively mild. Now, compared to the last cycle, we're about to move into what happened when we had this epic COVID crash. And I really don't think we're going to have to stomach something like that again, which is good. So again, even if it just came down a little bit and then starts building back up in anticipation for the halving, again, I'd say this is normal cycle behavior. So based on these charts, it doesn't look anything out of the ordinary. Now let's look at the data slightly differently, going from January to January of the halving year. Now this was a chart shared by Into the Cryptoverse, and Ben is a big fan of using this bull market support band. And all he was trying to say with this is that each time at this point in the halving year, which I haven't quite marked on, Bitcoin's price has always come back down to meet the support band here, which is currently about 38,000. So just in the last day, this did actually clip about 38,500. So this would suggest that it's just history repeating. It may come down to as low as 35, but that's probably going to be the lowest. But again, the anomaly would have been if it stayed above 40. That is something that has never happened before. It's always corrected in Q1 down to this band, which, like I said, is around 38,000. And looking at it slightly different, this is from January to the end of the year of the halving year, and this is the last three. And what this one says to me is that in the halving year, it's pretty much a lovely up and to the right chart. Now, being Q2, Q3, and Q4 being very, very strong, but where Bitcoin and the crypto market struggles is in this Q1 period. As you can see, there is a lot of moves to the downside before we get into the halving. And again, we've started the year with another move down. But again, this just looks like what happens at this point in the halving year. So yet another chart saying to me, this is nothing out of the ordinary. And in fact, it's pretty much what Bitcoin does at this point. Q1 being quite volatile, and then Q2, 3, and 4 looking very, very strong. And finally, let's just cross-reference this, looking at the data in a slightly different way, and this one on a quarterly basis. So right now, in this halving year, Bitcoin is down almost 6%. And if we look at the previous halving year, which was 2020, again, Q1 was down almost 11%. And even 2016, again, negative, down 3%. Backing up, that Q1 of the halving year does have its bumps in the road. And then backing up, that Q2 is probably going to be very strong, Q3 and Q4 being the strongest, and even going into the next year. So this would suggest bumps in the road for Q1. Do not panic sell, because Q2, 3, and 4, if history repeats, is going to be very, very strong. And more specifically, if we look month by month, now it was actually January that was a good month, it turns out, in 2020, and it was February and March that had the corrections. So if we have the correction slightly earlier, then likely these are going to pick up. I've noticed that when looking at seasonality, what happened the previous month is probably more important than what happens in the actual month. For example, the reason this month was very, very strong is because the month before, in fact, both months before, there was quite a big correction. And once that happens, it becomes very easy to bounce back. Now, this time, The reason it's down instead of up is because the month before, in fact, both months before, again, had quite strong corrections. So if this month ends up being negative, I would say, unlike this time, February and March will likely be positive. That would be my prediction on seasonality. But again, I always think it's better to look at more data together, and for it to be down in Q1 again backs up, as with all the other charts, this is nothing out of the ordinary. And if you're able to buy the dip, then you're probably going to be richly rewarded. But just remember, there are no guarantees, just probabilities. Now, we also must remember that even in crypto's mega mania stage, as good as it gets when it's going parabolic, there are multiple big corrections along the way. And these are between 30% and 40%. So this is definitely an image to burn into your brain. You're going to have to go through the correction that we're going through right now multiple times over the next couple of years. So if 30 to 40% is very, very common, and where are we right now? This is the live chart, and let's just take this measured move. So from this peak down to where it bottomed at about 38,500, it's about a 20% drop. So this says to me that if a 30 to 40% is very common, then there still may be some more downside to come. 30% taken us down to about 3,500, and 40%, which is probably less likely, would be the $30,000 level. But I think something major would probably have to happen in the economy for us to get down there. For me, what's most likely is that we've either touched the bottom here at around 38,500, or I personally don't see it really going further below 35,000. However, even if it did, it's not as bad as what happened in COVID, and it's certainly something that has happened many times before. And so, with Bitcoin recently breaking below the $40,000 level, the big question was, how far down is this thing going to go? Now, compared to the previous cycles, I would say nothing really looks out of the ordinary. The halving year chart shows that in a halving year, it's pretty much up and to the right. Wait, this is reverse, up and to the right. Struggling in the first couple of months and then building up pace faster and faster as the year goes on. The seasonality charts obviously show the same thing. It's Q1 where there's bumps in the road, and then as the quarters go, it just gets more and more explosive all through next year. And as we saw in the 2017 mania stage, there are multiple 30 to 40% pullbacks, suggesting this is just one of many to come over the next year. And the fact that it's only down 20% means there could be more downside to come. However, this would still be classed as normal behavior. And finally, the latest CPI print really did not help things, but remember, patience is key, because so far the next one is really going to shock people to the downside, which means lowering of interest rates and the money printer being able to be turned back on. So no panic selling. So there you are, guys. Hope you enjoyed. Now let me know, how are you faring in this latest pullback? And for anyone who just joined crypto, buying into the Bitcoin ETFs, in the short term, timing can suck. However, 6 months from now, you're going to be very, very pleased. Now, if you've got any burning questions that you must get answered, then drop them below. However, just remember, to get rid of 100% of the comment spam and trading bots that plague YouTube comments, we are trying out the new SuperThanks Commenting system. So to get your question or comment read and replied to, or just to say thanks, then use SuperThanks below. And for now, just to say, if you did enjoy anything in the video, then drop a like, and a big thank you to everyone who does, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.